Welcome back. You're watching Morning Express. Now, the war pitting the executive and the judiciary has escalated after the 2017 general election. During his first Madaraka Day speech in Kisumu, President Uhuru Kenyatta blamed the judiciary for heavy losses running into billions of shillings due to the many unfavorable rulings against the executive. But in Maraga's statement yesterday, he sought to turn the tables on President Kenyatta, as Richard Tinina tells us.
David Kenani Maraga.
During his tenure as Chief Justice, the relationship between David Maraga and President Uhuru Kenyatta was a strained one. And even after his exit, it appears Maraga and the President remain on a collision course.
From the nullification of a presidential election in 2017 to an attempt to stop the will of the people as expressed through the BBI, the judiciary has indeed tested our constitutional limits.
The president, during Madaraka Day celebrations in Kisumu last Tuesday, blamed the loss of trillions of shillings on the annulment of the 2017 presidential election.
It is a fact that we were losing close to 1 billion shillings every working hour for the 123 days we held the 2017 election. The question the national conversation should therefore ask is who carried the burden of this choice? Was it the judiciary or the people?
The cost has not been occasioned by the judiciary. The cost has been occasioned by those who violated the law. If we set aside, we nullified the presidential election. Why? Because the law was not followed. If the president and his people and the IBC followed the law, we would not have nullified the petition. So who has caused that cost? The president is putting it on the court. It is not the court which has done that. It is them who have violated the law and brought the cost of that.
When it comes to court orders,
while I stand by the rule of law, and I will always obey the decisions of the courts,
no, the immunity goes down. As a result of disobedience of the court orders, starting from the president, come to the ministers, come to the permanent secretaries and the others, criminal elements have taken advantage of that. And they are disobeying court orders and the law left, right and center. Because they know nothing will happen.
The president asked the courts to reflect on the consequences of judicial decisions that Maraga says is nothing new.
Let me tell you, we do that all the time. We do that all the time.
With the executive training its guns on the judiciary, to Maraga, the independence of the judiciary is at stake.
The judges will be there. Kesi ikikuja kotini, judge anaangalia anasema, hii kesi nikikata namna hii, raisi au waziri fulani atasema nini? Wacha nione vile nafanya namna hii. Is that the country you want us to live in?
And if nothing changes,
we can go on pole mwishowe, we will not have a judiciary.
Rita Tinina, KTN News.
All right, and I'd like to get the take of Churchill Saoke, who is here in studio with us, on that last statement by the former CJ. Now, if we go on like this, then we probably won't have a judiciary as we have it today, because every judge will be second-guessing their possible rulings and basing it on possible ramifications from the political elite. What's your take?
Yes, I think that is very clear, because you see, the moment you have intimidated the judiciary, you have already influenced the kind of decisions that they can be able to make. And you know, that is very unfortunate, because you'll find, you know, the judiciary is the last resort for each and every person to go and get justice, and it's their responsibility to ensure that every decision they make is in accordance with the law and it's not influenced by personality, how senior, however powerful or whatsoever. So if we go the dimension of the decisions of the judiciaries being as per the cadre that you have in the society, then we will not have even the significance of having not just the judiciary, but even the law itself. Because the law should be able to make us all equal.
Yes.
So I think it is very significant that even in the interest of the president, it is important to have a working judiciary, that it works in the best interest of the political class when there is order in society. And order in society can only be created when there is a constitutional dispensation where each and every person follows the law, each and every person follows the rules and laws that have been put down to ensure that there is order in the society. Otherwise, if that is not the case, that anarchy that the former Chief Justice is actually talking about would have much more impact, not just even on the ordinary people, but on the government itself. Because if there is no order, the anarchy exists, it means there is no government. If there is no government, it means you have failed as a president.
Right.
So it is in the best interest of His Excellency to ensure that there is order in society. And just allow me to speak something about the deep ideological thing that His Excellency spoke about during the Madaraka Day on the burden of choice.
Go ahead.
Quite ideological.
Yes.
You know, the whole question of the balance of the balance of the burden of choice, you know, I think there was a misconception as to before the judiciary makes decisions, there are actions that have made them to make that decision. They are not making these decisions in solitude. There are things that people have done that have contributed to a breach of law that have been brought in facts in front of the judges and the judiciary, and has made the judiciary says that, you know what, in view of the Constitution and in view of the legal framework that has been laid for these particular things, the law was not followed. So we should go deeper and not just blame the judiciary, but blame who made this, who breached these laws, who breached these regulations that made the judges to make this ruling against these specific institutions.
The extenuating circumstances that influence some of these rulings. Now, I'd like George Kithi to also talk about the impeachment element and the possibilities with that. There's during the break, we're talking about an environment for impeachment and an impeachable rather offense or deed by the executive. Could you explain this to our viewers and why and how that influences the possibilities of impeachment?
That's an important point. The point is the threshold for impeachment of the president is very high. Now, we're looking at the environment that is subsisting now.
Yeah.
The political environment is that the president, for some reason, has managed to compromise the opposition. In a sense, the opposition works with the government, and as such, we do not expect voices against the government on certain topical issues or social issues as we find them now. For instance, there are committees. There is a committee that would be concerned more in matters legal as we speak in both houses. We've not had any pronouncement from that because ordinarily there are certain positions that are taken up by opposition in parliament, and therefore those opposition voices cannot be heard. We only therefore see the judiciary as the lone voice and probably some activists and law society as the voices that probably put the president to notice and the executive. But more importantly is this: the courts have made pronouncements, including on the BBI matter in the High Court. The judges said that the president has breached Article 6 of the Constitution.
Yes.
They've also opened up proceedings are viable and can be brought against the president when he's breached the Constitution in terms of being personally liable under Article 6, in breach of Article 6 of the Constitution. Now that is important. What is important is any person who breaches Article 6 cannot hold a public office and is not available to hold that public office or continue to hold that public office. That's a serious pronouncement. If it's a serious pronouncement, one of the reasons for impeaching a president, a sitting president, is if he has breached provisions of the Constitution, especially Article 6 of the same. Now, that being the environment and a pronouncement is subsisting that the president has breached Article 6 of the Constitution. If it was a different dispensation, a different political environment, certainly, the opposition will have picked that and run with the argument that the president, therefore, has an impeachable offense, can be impeached in the sense that he has breached Article 6 and the ground is already set. So the ground for impeachment, consequently, is available and can be used. However, the political environment is different.
Fertile
so there is
yeah.
the environment for impeaching the president, because in fact there's a pronouncement and a finding of court,
yes,
although it's still going on appeal. And the environment is such that there is no opposition that can take that up, for the reason that the leadership of opposition is working with the current government. So we don't expect a motion, for instance, to impeach the president as of now. The only issue will be in the curve of an administration. When a president comes into power, there is hope at the beginning, because the people then, while the government is being constituted, expect something new. And when something is new, it breeds hope into the public.
Right.
And that cycle is what goes on. After some time, then the president reaches the apex of what will be his leadership. For instance, the things that he has done, the highlights. Then he starts to descend in terms of the legitimacy and what people will be looking up to him in terms of fulfillment and changing lives and influence society. For instance, when the president gets to the tail end of his leadership, there's very little that he can do.
Right.
In fact, it dawns on the people that he's on his way out, especially if he's doing he's finalizing his second term.
Yes.
Now, the reason is that the people expect that the new person will give them that hope that was there at the beginning of the first term of the 5 years. So what we're saying is, eventually, the president will lose legitimacy. That is the impeachable moment that can be available, because you see, members of parliament are no longer beholden to the president, to the executive as is now. What happens, members of parliament are now looking forward to the electorates. What do the people want?
Okay.
The voices of the people then are heard more, because it is the voices of the people that then put pressure on the members of parliament. They make decisions according to what the people want on the ground,
because
as opposed to what the executive is beholden to. So it reaches a time when the center can't hold anymore the legitimacy of the president, which is basically the power that overrides and is a dominion over the people. That ordinarily fades towards the end. When it fades, then you'll see the voices, members of parliament can speak more, opposition coming out more, and there's more criticism on the regime, as opposed to when it is at the center of the regime or the middle of the term, where the president is at his best and at his peak. That is where we are now.
All right.
As we slide into the next general election, we will see more criticism, and some of these things, if they remain a constant, will be reasons for impeachment. For now, as matters stand, we can't and we don't expect as Kenyans any impeachment motions to come, even if the environment is available for that.
Realistically speaking. Now, if you missed that exclusive interview, you can go on to the KTN website and see it for yourself. There's interviews done by Sophia Wanuna, and of course, those stories by Rita and Haimba also on there. Or you can grab yourself a copy of the Standard today and find out more about all that was said by the former CJ. Now, we will be shifting gears to the Honorable Sakwa's wheelhouse, and that is the economy. I'd like you to touch on, or rather analyze for us, this breakdown that has been given to us by the Daily Nation this morning. You're told Yatani headache. It's a tough balancing act for Treasury as he tries to raise hopes for the nation, seeking relief from the economic hurdles occasioned by the COVID-19, but of course amid gaping revenue shortfalls. And they're telling us about what the tax hit list. We have motorcycles and bread. We have LPG, jewelry, mining, nicotine products, commercial banks, and Panta and betting. All these have been affected or are going to be affected. What do you make about this breakdown? And of course, could you analyze this for us as we prepare to go deeper into it in our next segment?
Thank you very much, Trix. First and foremost, we have a big budget, nominally the biggest in our history, and someone has to pay for it. The Treasury is going to be looking for every shilling they can get from wherever they can get it, or as many shillings they can get from whoever they can get. There is a chance that they will try and put a tax on virtually everything, particularly things that are commonly used, which means people are likely to drop them simply because of a price increase. They may adjust a bit how much of the service or the good they use, but they're not likely to drop it. And so those kinds of things have more opportunity to raise taxes than the things that people drop the moment you raise taxes. It's going to be a challenge for the CS finance to balance the fact that we are in a COVID era and right in the middle of it. And it's not clear when the post-COVID era will come. It may come in a few years, the way it seems now. So we're going to have to muddle through with people struggling with basic, for basic necessities at the household level. And so it's only going to be perhaps on the state conscience, if there's anything like that, that would restrain the degree of taxation. They are going to place more taxation on things where collection is easy. That's why you find things like energy, like fuel, it's easy to collect it at the pump, and without much leakage in something like that. It's a bit more complicated to change the tax rule for corporates, because they can go to court, they will slow it, may take years before it can be agreed. So although some of that will be done, only if they're across the board, like the VAT taxes, for example. The income taxes are going to become an increasing target of this. But the reason is largely that we have a budget that is so large that funding is a challenge. But even with all of that given, I mean, if they did all of that, in the best case scenario, which has now been defined by way of a projection, that the aim to get from ordinary revenue as much as about 1.8 trillion, if you don't put in the revenue collections by institutions, A&A as they call it, which would bring the total revenue to about 2 trillion, and a budget of 3.66, call it 3.7 trillion, still leaving out, if all of that were to hold, about 1.7 trillion that has to be funded from somewhere. That somewhere is probably going to be largely borrowing or or grants and so on. So a combination of those. Grants are normally small and unpredictable and conditional and so on. So because of that, I think the CH is going to be desperately looking at every corner possible to raise taxes.
Absolutely. And so when you look at this from the perspective of the common Mwananchi, what would your word be? Prepare yourselves for tighten your belt.
If you have a belt still, your belt is
okay.
Tighten your belt, change your habits. Because now, see, for example, with all of that given, and parents are struggling with fees, and you know the day school fees is only about, I won't say only about, but I should say it's 9,000, 10,000, say between 9 and 12,000. Some schools charge differently for day schools.
Right.
Even that is a big problem. I don't know if it is just in the context of my constituency and my county, but from what I see, at least in the media, this is a challenge everywhere. The minister comes up and says, yes, principals can send kids home if they can't pay. Why aren't they paying? They're not paying because of the difficulties that we've got, particularly in this corona period. But not just because of the corona period, that our development over the last 10 years or so, even if it has been increasing the aggregates, the household distribution of that income is not showing up in people's pockets. So that has to be thought through. That should be analyzed. That should influence how the minister taxes. Taxation can change fortunes and create fortunes. So when you have huge budgets, and we can say how big it is in East Africa, that all the rest of the budgets combined don't total up to the Kenyan budget, that's not necessarily a good thing. Then can the Kenyans carry that burden? Can they actually afford this generation at this time to finance that kind of budget?
And the Standard this morning has a fantastic visual guide to the budget 2021 and 2022. It tells us about, it breaks it down pretty well, and the total budget is 3.63 trillion shillings, up from 2.84 trillion shillings in 2020-2021 financial year. And then the budget deficit, of course, is now 1.56 trillion. The total loans and grants amount to 1.63 trillion, and the total projected revenue, or rather the total revenue projected, is 2.04 trillion, and this will be gotten from those taxes and ministerial fees that we'll be talking about. And then now they go further to break it down and tell us the KRA is expected to raise 1.7 trillion shillings in the 12 months to July 2022. And of course, further breaking it down to income tax from employees and businesses will be 834 billion shillings. And then we have value added tax that's expected to amount to 472.9 billion shillings. Excise duty 241 billion shillings. Import duty 119 billion shillings. And other taxes including investment income and mop-ups 108.2 billion shillings. There's so much more figures that have been made easy for you to understand in the standard. So grab yourself a copy and get yourself some understanding of what lies ahead in terms of the upcoming budget reading and of course how that will be affecting you. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we shall be digging deeper into the budgets.